probably most voters, is it would back a ban on trans conversion therapy, despite Boris Johnson's U-turning. There's been, it's difficult to keep up with the government U-turns on many issues, let alone the trans issue. But the Prime Minister has said he will ban therapy that aims to stop people being gay conversion therapy, but he did not want a similar measure for trans people. This after the concerns that people who were talking about being trans wouldn't even be able to access just any counselling at all about whether or not they were really trans or not. Well, let's talk about this with Jane Ozanne, who's the director of the Ozanne Foundation and chair of the Ban Conversion Therapy Coalition. Good morning to you, Jane.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed. I was quite interested to see this polling for the Times newspaper suggesting that most Conservative voters would, 62% would back the ban 65% would back a ban on this. Now, I think that's because they don't really understand what they mean. I think when people talk about gay conversion therapy or trans conversion therapy, people have got this idea about this sort of shock treatment, bullying, aggressive, people being told that what they are is wrong and immoral or unchristian or Muslim or something like that, and that therefore their views on this are rather skewed, and that actually people realise that a ban on trans conversion therapy could actually stop a 12-year-old kid going to their parents, their teacher, their counsellor, doctor and saying, I think I might be trans, and that person, that adult, trying to help them discuss whether or not that was actually the case, that they could be convicted of a criminal offence.
Julia, I completely disagree with you. I think the general public are very well aware what trans conversion therapy is. It's being told that they can't be cisgendered, and what you've just said there is absolute rubbish, I'm afraid. The conversion therapy ban will have no impact whatsoever on those conversations. What we're talking about here is people being told that they can never be trans because of an ideology or a cultural norm in a person's close community, which tells them they will never be allowed to be trans.
When you say be allowed to be trans,
predetermined purpose, and anything to do with medical health care is completely different. Of course, people need to be challenged. Of course, there's a long process that trans children, trans adults have to go through. Too long for many, because they end up taking their lives, and that's why the general public, I think, have shown very clearly.
Okay, a couple of things there, Jane. Again, this claim which is always used that people end up taking their lives because they're going through a very long process through this. I'm sorry, but the stats on that are not entirely clear, actually, and I think that is an unfair argument to use. But also, you say they need to be.
I was at a protest with 3,000 people, where we heard testimony after testimony on Sunday of young people whose friends had taken their lives, who themselves tried to take their lives.
So there are very, very sadly, there is a mental health crisis. A lot of young people are taking their lives, but there are also young people.
Pressure that people like this conversation has.
Okay, that's no.
I'm sorry, but it's
Jane. Now here we go. Transphobia, yeah. Jane, people having conversations doesn't cause people to commit suicide. Okay,
I'm sorry.
Having a civilized
the mental health.
Jane, there's no point having this debate if you. If you're saying
to answer your question.
No, but you're actually. I'm trying to ask a question, but you are not letting me finish a question. Okay, so you made various points. I'm challenging some of those points. We know that there is a mental health crisis. There is quite a lot of evidence being challenged on this claim that because young people are waiting a long time and going through a very long process, they are committing suicide. There's also a concern about young people committing suicide or attempting suicide after going through the conversion process. A lot of people who are involved in this, the Tavistock Clinic and others, which is the biggest clinic in this country dealing with gender dysphoria for teenagers and children, that there have been massive resignations because people are so concerned that actually the process isn't long enough and people are not going through counselling. They're not being talked to. And that a lot of the young people who claim that they believe that they are trans are people who are autistic, people who may or may not, particularly girls, may actually be lesbian, but feel uncomfortable about that. And that we need to have that process. And the concern is that a ban on conversion therapy would actually stop people feeling they could have that conversation. And yes, challenge the idea that you may not be trans.
So, to various points you've made there, the ban on conversion therapy is to do with something completely different to what you are postulating there. It will not impact people having those conversations. What we need is safe, affirming places which are safe. That does not mean that you affirm. No, let me finish. You've had a long introduction there. Affirming spaces do not mean that you sit there and just affirm everything somebody says. It means it's a safe space where there is no fear of judgment. And frankly, what happens so much in society now, stoked by a lot of these culture wars, which are unhealthy and unhelpful, where the difference between conversion therapy, which is something with a predetermined purpose, is muddled and conflated with discussions around trans people and people who are gender critical, as you openly are. I think that is really unhealthy and unhelpful, because ultimately what we need to do is protect people from harm. And the stats are clear, Julia. The stats are extremely clear. The international community now, including all the medical experts, have spoken out about the need for a ban on conversion therapy for trans people, because they are far more likely to be offered it or undergo it, and indeed their outcomes are much worse in terms of suicidal ideation.
I picked up on the word affirming. What we need is safe counselling and safe spaces where young people who are confused and anxious can talk about it. But you use the word affirming. That's been the trouble, that we've had people basically told, and parents who've been told, look, if you even question your child saying, I think, a girl says, I think I may be a boy, or a boy says, I think I may be a girl, if you even question that you are transphobic, and that you're actually pushing your child down the route where they will end up taking their own life. That's happened. Parent after parent has testified to that.
Well, I'm sorry, I disagree. Affirming, and in fact, we've just had a statement from many senior religious leaders talking about the need for affirming spaces, which are spaces that give a safe space, a place where there is no judgment. Well, yes, and that's why you and I disagree on what the concept of affirming care. And the mental health professions, who have all put out statements this week backing a ban, have said exactly the same, that what we need is to have safe spaces, frankly, with professionals, because I don't think these are conversations that should be had with people who don't understand gender dysphoria. It is complex, and it would be much better for our mental health professionals and our healthcare professionals to be having those.
But we need to know they can have those without being accused of being transphobic, but simply by saying, maybe you're not, maybe you're gay, maybe you're confused, maybe you have autism. We know there's a massive range of autism as well. But again, that phrase, gender critical, biological fact. It doesn't make you gender critical, it's just biological fact. I believe in biological facts. Really good to talk to you, though. Jane Ozanne, chair of Banned Conversion Therapy Coalition. Would love to carry that on, but we are up against the clock. Up next, we will get